You look like the maid. CEO husband. Humiliates wife at gala, unaware she sold her ring for his suit. The crystal chandeliers of the Four Seasons ballroom cast a golden, suffocating glow over the San Francisco elite. It was a sea of silk, diamonds, and ambition. I stood near the entrance, clutching the strap of my worn-out purse, feeling invisible. My husband, Julian Thorne, was the center of attention near the champagne tower. He looked impeccable in a custom midnight blue Armani suit. He was laughing with investors, exuding the confidence of a man who owned the world. I took a deep breath and walked toward him, holding a small congratulatory gift, a simple tie clip I had engraved myself. "Julian," I whispered, reaching for his arm. "Happy anniversary." The laughter in the circle died instantly. Julian turned, his smile vanished. They were replaced by a look of sheer icy disgust that pierced right through me. He didn't look at my face, he looked at my dress. It was a faded floral print I had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. "Serena?" His voice wasn't warm, it was sharp, like cracking glass. "What are you doing here?" I wanted to surprise you," I stammered, conscious of the eyes burning into me. Julian laughed, a dry, cruel sound. He turned to the investors, gesturing to a stunning woman standing next to him, Bella Vane. Bella was wearing a blood-red gown that fit her like a second skin, holding a Chanel clutch. "Gentlemen," Julian announced, his voice booming. "This is Bella, my brilliant legal counsel and the true face of Thorn Corp's future." He paused, then pointed a manicured finger at me. "And this is my domestic situation. My wife, who apparently thinks a charity gala is a grocery run." The crowd chuckled. My face burned. Bella smirked, sipping her Dom Perignon. "Honey," she cooed, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "you're ruining the aesthetic. Maybe you should wait in the car?" "Go home, Serena," Julian hissed, leaning in close so only I could smell his expensive cologne. "You look like the help. You're embarrassing me." I gripped the gift in my pocket until my knuckles turned white. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. He didn't know. He didn't know that the only reason he was wearing that Armani suit tonight was because I had secretly sold my grandmother's vintage diamond ring last week to pay for it. I had nothing left, and he looked at me like I was trash. I turned around and walked away, the sound of their laughter chasing me out into the cold rain. The following morning, the gray fog of San Francisco swirled around the 45th floor of the Thorn Corp headquarters. While I was at home trying to scrub the humiliation off my skin, Julian was standing in his corner office, staring out at the Bay Bridge through floor-to-ceiling glass. The facade of the perfect billionaire was already cracking. He turned away from the view and slammed his hand onto his mahogany desk, rattling his MacBook Air. On the screen, a terrifying financial report blinked in red. Thorn Corp wasn't just struggling, it was bleeding out. The investors at the gala had been impressed by his suit, but they hadn't signed the checks yet. "We have 3 weeks, Julian," Bella said, lounging on a leather sofa, scrolling through her phone with a bored expression. "If we don't win the bid for the Blackwood Smart City project, the bank sees everything. Your penthouse, your Porsche, this office, it's all gone." Julian loosened his tie, sweat beading on his forehead. "I know, but my architects are idiots. Their designs are derivative. Blackwood Global demands innovation, something revolutionary." Bella stood up, the heels of her Louboutins clicking sharply on the polished concrete floor. She walked over to him and placed a manicured hand on his shoulder. "You already have the innovation. It's sitting on the drafting table in your guest bedroom." Julian froze. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing. "Serena?" "She's been working on those smart city blueprints for months," Bella purred, her voice low and dangerous. I saw them when I came over for coffee last week." "Julian, they are brilliant. Better than anything your entire team has produced in a decade. Sustainable energy integration, AI traffic flow. It's exactly what the mysterious Chairman Blackwood is looking for." Julian let out a scoff, though his eyes betrayed his interest. Serena? She's a housewife. She hasn't worked a real job in years. She's a genius you've beaten into submission, Bella corrected him coldly. But here is the plan. You need those designs to save the company, but you don't need her. She picked up a crystal tumbler of water and took a sip. Get her to sign over the intellectual property rights. Tell her it's for insurance purposes or tax benefits. She trusts you blindly. She'll sign anything. And after she signs? Julian asked. He had a cruel spark igniting in his eyes. After she signs, we cut the dead weight. Bella smiled, a predator looking at wounded prey. I'll handle the legal side. We frame her for infidelity. A morality clause in the prenup ensures she leaves with $0. You get the billion-dollar contract, keep the company, and get rid of the maid all in one stroke. Julian looked back at the skyline, his reflection in the glass looking distorted and monstrous. He didn't feel guilt. He felt relief. Make it happen, he said. Later that afternoon, the California sun beat down on the manicured lawns of Julian's Malibu estate. It was a picture of paradise, but the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. My father, Magnus, was kneeling by the rose bushes near the driveway. To the world, and to my husband, he was just an old, unbroke man I had begged to employ as a gardener out of pity. He wore a stained flannel shirt and a pair of worn-out work boots that had seen better decades. He moved slowly, his hands calloused from soil and labor. The roar of an engine shattered the peace. Julian's silver Porsche 911 Turbo S screeched into the driveway, tires kicking up gravel. He was home early, his temper likely frayed from the financial doomsday clock ticking at his office. As Magnus stood up to greet him, his hose accidentally sprayed a fine mist of water into the air. A few harmless droplets landed on the hood of the pristine sports car. Julian exploded out of the driver's seat like he had been shot. "You senile idiot!" Julian screamed, slamming the car door so hard the windows rattled. He stormed over to my father and kicked the water bucket, sending soapy water splashing over Magnus's boots. "Do you have any idea how much that paint job costs? It's worth more than your entire pathetic life." I dropped the laundry basket I was holding on the porch and sprinted across the lawn. "Julian, stop it!" I threw myself between them, grabbing my father's trembling arm. Magnus didn't look scared, though. He looked disappointed. His eyes, sharp and intelligent beneath his bushy eyebrows, were fixed on Julian with an intensity that didn't match his ragged appearance. "He didn't mean to," I pleaded, wiping a spot of dirt from my father's shirt. "It's just water. It will dry." Julian sneered, adjusting his Rolex Submariner as he looked down at us. "God, look at you two. The apple really doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? You're both useless. Just burdens I have to drag through life." He stepped closer to Magnus, poking a finger into the old man's chest. "You're lucky I let you sleep in the shed, old man. One more mistake, and you're on the street. And take your daughter with you. She's seemingly forgotten her place, too." Julian stormed into the house, slamming the heavy oak front door. I turned to my father, tears welling in my eyes. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'll get you some dry clothes." Magnus slowly picked up his battered straw hat. He didn't look like a victim anymore. For a fleeting second, his posture straightened, and the aura of a titan of industry flickered through the disguise. "Don't worry, Serena," he said quietly, his voice steady and cold as steel. "He just failed the final test. He just doesn't know it yet." That evening, the atmosphere in the house shifted uncomfortably. After the violent outburst in the driveway, I expected Julian to lock himself in his study and ignore me for days. Instead, he found me in the kitchen, holding 2 glasses of Cabernet Sauvignon. "Serena," he said softly, his voice lacking its usual edge. He placed the wine on the marble island and sighed. "I'm sorry about today. The pressure from the board. It's turning me into someone I don't like. I shouldn't have taken it out on your father." I looked up, surprised. It was the first apology I had heard in years. "He's just trying to help, Julian. I know. He lied smoothly, sliding a glass toward me. And I know I haven't been supportive of you either. Bella told me you've been drawing again. My heart skipped a beat. Yes, just some concepts for urban planning. I calls it the eco-grid. Julian smiled, a warm, charming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I want to see them succeed, Serena. I really do. In fact, I want to include them in a portfolio Thorncorp is building. But to do that and to protect us from liability if the company goes under, I need to move the intellectual property rights into a holding trust. He pulled a thick document from his briefcase and laid it on the counter. Next to it, he placed his heavy black resin Mont Blanc Meisterstück pen. It's just standard procedure, he reassured me, seeing my hesitation. It protects your work under the corporate umbrella. It means we're partners, finally. Partners. That was all I had ever wanted, to be seen as his equal, not his maid. I looked at the dense legal jargon. Words like irrevocable transfer and total assignment of rights blurred together under the kitchen lights. I should probably read it, I started. Julian's face hardened imperceptibly, then softened again. He reached out and touched my hand. Do you not trust me, Serena? After everything I do to keep a roof over our heads, I'm trying to secure our future. The guilt tripped me up exactly as he intended. I didn't want to ruin this rare moment of peace. I didn't want to be the difficult wife. I trust you, I whispered. I picked up the heavy pen. The gold nib scratched against the paper as I signed my name. Serena Cross-Thorn. I didn't know it then, but with that ink, I hadn't just signed a partnership. I had just signed away a billion-dollar idea for free and handed Julian the weapon he would use to destroy me. Julian watched the ink dry, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Good girl, he said, taking the papers back instantly. Now I have some calls to make. A week later, I returned home from grocery shopping, my arms full of paper bags. The sky over San Francisco was threatening rain, dark clouds brooding over the Golden Gate. As I approached the front porch, my heart stopped. My Louis Vuitton suitcase, the old one from our honeymoon, was lying on its side in the middle of the driveway. Next to it were trash bags filled with my clothes. Some had burst open, scattering my sweaters and sketchbooks across the wet pavement. What is this? I dropped the groceries, eggs cracking on the asphalt. The front door opened. Julian stood there, but he wasn't alone. Bella Vane was beside him, arms crossed, and wearing a smug expression that made my stomach churn. Julian? Why are my things outside? I asked, my voice trembling. Julian didn't answer. He just looked at me with cold detachment. Bella stepped forward, holding a manila envelope. Serena Cross, she announced formally, like she was in a courtroom. You are hereby served with divorce papers. Julian is filing on the grounds of adultery. Adultery? I laughed, a hysterical, confused sound. That's insane. I've never looked at another man. The evidence says otherwise, Bella said, tossing a stack of photos onto the driveway. I scrambled to pick them up. They were blurry, grainy pictures of a woman who looked like me entering a motel room with a stranger. It was clearly Photoshop. The hair was wrong, the posture was wrong, but to a casual observer, it was damning. This is fake, I screamed, looking at Julian. You know this is fake. Julian, look at me. I don't want to hear it, Julian said flatly. You signed the morality clause in the prenup. Adultery voids your claim to any assets. You get nothing. No alimony, no house, no shares. But I signed those designs over to you. We're partners. Correction, Julian smirked, leaning against the doorframe. You assigned the rights to Thorncorp. I am Thorncorp. You are just a trespassing ex-wife. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. The electronic lock on the front door chirped. I've changed the codes to the smart home system. Your access is revoked. Get off my property before I call the police. Julian, please, it's going to rain. I have nowhere to go. Not my problem, he said. He stepped back inside and slammed the heavy door, when the electronic deadbolt slid into place with a final metallic thud. The first drops of rain began to fall, turning the dust on my discarded clothes into mud. I stood there, shivering, staring at the closed door of the home I had built, realizing the man I loved was a monster. The walk down from the Malibu hills was a blur of freezing rain and humiliation. I dragged my muddy Louis Vuitton suitcase behind me, the wheels rattling loudly against the asphalt. Every car that passed splashed dirty water onto my legs, but I was too numb to care. By the time I reached the city limits, night had fallen. The glittering skyline of San Francisco, usually a symbol of opportunity, now looked like a fortress of glass and steel built to keep people like me out. I found a cheap, neon-lit motel near the highway. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unzip my purse. I pulled out my Chase Sapphire Reserve credit card, the heavy metal card that used to command respect. "One room, please," I stammered to the clerk, who was watching a game on a tiny TV. He eyed my wet hair and ruined designer clothes with suspicion. He swiped the card. The machine beeped a harsh rejection tone. "Declined," he muttered, sliding it back. "That's impossible," I panicked. "Run it again, please." "I ran it twice, lady. It says, card reported stolen. Confiscate." "You got cash?" I checked my wallet. Empty. Julian had canceled everything. He hadn't just divorced me, he had financially erased me. I stumbled out of the lobby before the clerk could call the cops, leaving the only shelter I could find. I huddled under the overhang of a bus stop, I clutching my iPhone. The battery icon was red, 12% left. I dialed the only number I had left, my father. "The subscriber you are trying to reach is currently unavailable." "Dad, please pick up." I sobbed into the receiver, leaving a voicemail. "Julian threw me out. I have nowhere to go. I'm scared." I didn't know then that Magnus wasn't ignoring me. He was in a secure boardroom halfway across the world, liquidating assets to prepare for war. But in that moment, sitting on a cold metal bench while the city slept, I felt truly abandoned. Across the street, a digital billboard flashed an advertisement. It was Julian's face, smiling next to the headline, "Thorn Corp, building your future." I pulled my knees to my chest, closing my eyes against the glare. I was the architect of his success, and now I was sleeping on the street he was claiming to own. Morning broke over San Francisco with a cruel, blinding brightness. My bones ached from sleeping on the metal bench, and my stomach twisted with a hunger I had never experienced before. The rich aroma of roasted coffee beans wafted from the Starbucks on the corner, taunting me. I stood up, smoothing down my ruined dress, trying to maintain a shred of dignity as the morning commuters rushed past, avoiding eye contact. Suddenly, a sleek obsidian-black Mercedes Maybach S680 glided silently to the curb right in front of me. It was a machine of pure power and luxury, a stark contrast to my current reality. The back door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a charcoal gray suit that screamed, "Bespoke tailoring." He was on his phone, looking distracted. "I don't care about the zoning permits, just get it done," he said sharply into his AirPods. As he hurried toward the coffee shop, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. In his haste, a thick leather wallet slipped out with it, landing silently on the damp pavement. He kept walking, unaware. I stared at the wallet. It was bulging. There was probably enough cash in there to get me a hotel room, a hot meal, maybe even a train ticket out of here. My hand twitched. For a split second, desperation clouded my judgment. "Take it," a voice whispered. "Survival is all that matters." But I looked at my reflection in the tinted window of the Maybach. I was dirty and broken, but I wasn't a thief. I wasn't Julian. "Sir," I called out, my voice raspy. I bent down, snatched up the wallet, and ran after him. "Excuse me, sir." The man turned around, annoyed at the interruption. His eyes, piercing hazel, scanned me from head to toe. He saw the mud on my hem, the dark circles under my eyes. But when I held out the wallet, his expression shifted from annoyance to shock. You dropped this, I said, placing it in his hand. He opened it immediately. He didn't count the cash, he just looked back at me. Most people in your situation would have kept this. I may have lost my home, I said, lifting my chin, but I haven't lost my integrity. I turned to leave, but he stepped in front of me. Wait, I'm Ethan. Ethan Hunt. He pulled a crisp $100 bill from the wallet. Please take it. I don't want your charity, I said firmly, though my stomach growled loudly, betraying me. Ethan smiled, a genuine, lopsided grin that softened his sharp features. Okay, no charity, but let me buy you a coffee. You look like you could use the caffeine, and honestly, you just saved me a trip to the DMV to replace my license. That's worth a grande latte at least. 10 minutes later, I was holding a steaming cup and a warm bagel. Ethan handed me a heavy, matte black business card. I don't know your story, he said, looking at me with an intensity that made me blush. But you have the eyes of someone who appreciates structure. If you ever need a job, a real job, not a handout, call that number. With Ethan's coffee warming my hands and his card tucked safely in my pocket, I felt a flicker of hope. But first, I needed answers. I used the last of my change to take a bus to the outskirts of the city, to the dilapidated wooden cabin where my father had lived for the past 3 years. The place looked abandoned. The grass was overgrown, and the for sale sign in the neighbor's yard leaned crookedly. I pushed open the unlocked front door, expecting to find my dad packing his meager belongings, crushed by Julian's cruelty. Instead, I walked into a command center. The inside of the shack was unrecognizable. The rotting wood walls were covered with soundproofing foam. In the center of the room sat a massive teak desk, dominated by 3 curved monitors. The screens were alive with cascading waterfalls of data. Stock tickers, global market heat maps, and live feeds from Tokyo and London. And there, sitting in an ergonomic Herman Miller chair, wearing a silk robe and sipping espresso, was Magnus. Dad? I gasped, dropping my bag. He spun around. The hunched posture of the old gardener was gone. He looked powerful, sharp, and terrifyingly competent. On the desk next to him lay an iPad Pro displaying the corporate structure of Thorn Corp. Serena, he said, his voice deep and authoritative. He stood up and walked over, embracing me tightly. I'm sorry I didn't answer the phone. I had to secure the perimeter before I could extract you. Extract me? Dad, what is this? The computers, the stocks? I pulled away, looking at the screen. One headline caught my eye. Blackwood Global acquires majority stake in Silicon Valley Tech. You know me as Magnus the Gardener, he said, walking back to his desk and picking up a gold coin, flipping it over his knuckles. But the world knows me as Magnus Blackwood, founder of Blackwood Global. My knees gave out. I grabbed the edge of the table. Blackwood, the trillionaire investor? The one Julian is desperate to impress? The very same, Magnus smirked darkly. I went undercover 3 years ago. I wanted to know if the man marrying my daughter loved her for her soul or for the inheritance she didn't know she had. He tapped a key on his keyboard. A video feed popped up on the main screen. It was a recording from a hidden camera in Julian's driveway, the moment Julian kicked the water bucket. He failed, Serena, Magnus said, his eyes hardening into flint. He treated you like trash because he thought you were worthless. He treated me like dirt because he thought I was poor. He handed me the iPad. It showed a bank account in my name with a balance that made my head spin. It's time to stop crying, sweetheart, Magnus said softly. Go get cleaned up. We have an empire to topple. The shock of my father's revelation was still vibrating in my bones as a black SUV with tinted windows whisked us away from the shack. We weren't going to a hotel. We were going to the penthouse suite at the Mark, a sanctuary of luxury high above the city noise. First things first, Magnus said, handing me a platinum card. You need armor. You can't go to war wearing rags. I looked at him. I don't want your money to fight my battles, Dad. I want to do this myself. It's not my money, he corrected gently. It's your trust fund. It's been accumulating since the day you were born. Consider it back pay for dealing with Julian. An hour later, I was standing in the VIP fitting room of Dior. A team of stylists swarmed around me like efficient bees. They stripped away the muddy, our thrift store clothes that Julian had mocked. In their place, they draped me in structure and elegance. I chose a sharp, tailored white blazer and trousers, a power suit that screamed authority. It was the antithesis of the soft, floral dresses Julian had forced me to wear to look submissive. Next was the salon. As the stylist held up the scissors, I looked at my long, wavy hair in the mirror. It was the hair Julian loved to wrap around his fingers while he told me I was nothing without him. "Cut it," I said. "Short. Sharp." The scissors snipped. With every lock of hair that fell to the floor, I felt a weight lifting. The frightened housewife was being carved away, revealing something harder underneath. When I finally looked in the mirror, I gasped. The woman staring back wasn't Serena the victim, yet her bob cut framed a jawline set with determination. Her eyes, accentuated by professional makeup, didn't look sad anymore. They looked dangerous. I walked out of the salon wearing Jimmy Choo heels that clicked with a rhythm of vengeance. Magnus was waiting in the lobby, reading the Financial Times. He looked up and lowered the paper slowly. "My God," he whispered, a proud smile touching his lips. "You look just like your mother when she was closing a deal." I adjusted my blazer, feeling the cool silk against my skin. "I'm ready, Dad. But I'm not going back to Julian, not yet." I pulled out the black business card Ethan Hunt had given me. "I'm going to get a job," I said, "and I'm going to beat Julian at his own game. I'm using his biggest rival to do it." The headquarters of Hunt Architecture was a marvel of sustainable design. A glass spire wrapped in vertical gardens that breathed life into the concrete jungle. It was the complete opposite of Julian's cold, imposing fortress. I walked into the lobby, my heels clicking on the reclaimed wood floor. The receptionist looked up, ready to dismiss me, but paused when she saw my tailored Dior suit and the fierce confidence in my walk. "I'm here to see Ethan Hunt," I said. "Tell him Serena is here, the one with the wallet." 5 minutes later, I was ushered into the top-floor studio. It wasn't an office. It was a creative workshop. Blueprints covered every surface, and 3D printers hummed in the corner. Ethan was standing over a massive model of the city, sleeves rolled up, arguing with a structural engineer. He looked up, and for a moment, he didn't recognize me. The woman in the mud was gone. "Serena?" he asked, stepping closer, wiping graphite from his hands. "You cleaned up well." "I didn't come for the coffee this time," I said, placing my portfolio on the table. It contained new sketches I had made last night, furious, brilliant improvements on the eco-grid concept. "I came for the job." Ethan opened the portfolio. Silence fell over the room as he flipped through the pages. He traced the lines of my suspended park system and the solar-integrated skyscrapers. "This style," he murmured, looking at me sharply. "It reminds me of the leaked rumors about Thorncorp's new bid. But this is better. It has soul." "That's because Thorncorp's bid is a stolen, outdated version of my work," I said, my voice steady. "Julian Thorne is my ex-husband. He stole my designs. I want to help you crush him." The engineer gasped. Ethan just stared at me, processing the information. He saw the fire in my eyes, not just anger, but ambition. "If I hire you," Ethan said slowly, leaning against the table, "it's war. Julian will come for us. He plays dirty." "I know his playbook," I replied, stepping forward until we were inches apart. "I wrote half of it. I know where he cuts corners. I know his financial weak spots. And I know that his revolutionary design has a critical structural flaw he's too arrogant to see." Ethan smiled, that same lopsided grin from the coffee shop, but this time it was edged with competitive thrill. He extended his hand. "Welcome to the team, Serena. Let's go hunting." While I was refining my vengeance in Ethan's studio, But Julian was busy digging his own grave across town. Inside the Thorncorp boardroom, Julian stood before a group of skeptical bank executives. He was projecting my stolen designs onto the main screen via his iPad Pro. The smart city concept looked impressive, flashy, and expensive. "This is the future, gentlemen," Julian declared, pacing the room in his Tom Ford loafers. "Blackwood Global is looking for a visionary partner. With this design, the contract is practically ours. I just need a bridge loan to break ground. 50 million. The lead banker, a man with a face like crumpled parchment, adjusted his glasses. "It's a significant risk, Mr. Thorne. Your liquidity is concerning, and there are rumors of a competitor." "Ethan Hunt?" Julian scoffed, pouring himself a glass of water. "Hunt is a dreamer. He builds gardens. I build empires. Besides, I have insider information that Blackwood favors bold, aggressive infrastructure. This design is exactly what he wants." He didn't know that the insider information had been carefully planted by Magnus's network to mislead him. Bella Vane sat in the corner, chewing on the end of her pen. She looked uneasy. "Julian," she whispered during a break, "are you sure about the loan? If we don't win the bid, the collateral is the entire company. And your personal assets." "We won't lose," Julian hissed back, grabbing her arm tightly. "Serena's designs are genius. She was the only good thing about that marriage, and now I own her brain without having to deal with her whining. We are unstoppable." Back at Hunt Architecture, I was standing over a 3D holographic map. Ethan and I were working late, I fueled by takeout and adrenaline. "Here." I pointed to a section of Julian's projected foundation. "He's going to use cheap reinforced concrete to cut costs. It's his signature move. But the soil composition in that sector is unstable. If he builds it like that, it will sink within 5 years, Ethan finished, his eyes widening. It's a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. Exactly, I smiled grimly. We don't just need a better design, we need to prove his is dangerous. Ethan looked at me with a mixture of respect and something softer. You're terrifying, Serena. I learned from the worst, I replied. Now let's make sure Blackwood sees this. Little did Ethan know, Blackwood, my father, was already watching everything. 3 days before the final bid presentation, the cracks in Julian's fortress began to widen. Bella Vane was pacing in her office at Thorncorp, staring at her phone. She had just received a notification from her private investigator. It wasn't about Serena, it was about Julian. The report showed that Julian had secretly transferred $5 million of the company's emergency funds into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, under his name only. That bastard, Bella whispered, her knuckles turning white. He's planning to run if the deal goes south. He's going to leave me holding the bag for the fraud. She looked at the framed photo on her desk, her and Julian in Cabo smiling. It felt like a lifetime ago. Julian didn't love her. He didn't love anyone. She was just another tool like Serena, to be used and discarded. Bella made a decision. Survival was not about loyalty, it was about leverage, and she opened an encrypted messaging app, Signal, on her phone. She typed a message to a number she had acquired from a mutual contact in the legal world. Recipient, Ethan Hunt. Message. I have the unredacted financial audits of Thorncorp and proof that Julian falsified the structural safety reports. I want immunity. At Hunt Architecture, Ethan's phone buzzed on the drafting table. He glanced at it, frowned, and then handed it to me. Read this, he said. I looked at the message. A cold smile spread across my face. It's Bella. The rats are fleeing the sinking ship. Do we trust her? Ethan asked, skeptical. She helped destroy you. No, we don't trust her, I said, my voice hard. But we use her. She's the one who notarized the stolen designs. If she testifies that Julian coerced me or forged documents, and his claim to my work evaporates. I took Ethan's phone and typed a reply. Meet me at the pier. Midnight. Come alone. That night, under the cover of fog, I stood face to face with the woman who had ruined my life. Bella looked nervous, clutching her Prada coat tight against the wind. When she saw me dressed in sharp Saint Laurent, hair cut short, radiating power, she stepped back in shock. "Serena," she gasped. "You look different," I finished. "Save the compliments, Bella. Give me the drive." She hesitated, then handed over a silver USB drive. "This buries him, but you have to promise. My name stays out of the press." I took the drive, feeling the cold metal in my palm. "I promise nothing, Bella, but if you want a chance at redemption, you'll be ready to speak when I call on you." The day of the Blackwood Global Bidding Conference arrived with electric anticipation. The venue was the Silicon Valley Convention Center, a massive auditorium filled with the who's who of the tech and real estate world. Press cameras flashed, and bloggers live-streamed the arrival of the Titans. Julian arrived in a convoy of black SUVs. He stepped out looking like a king, waving to the cameras, flanked by his legal team. He didn't see Bella Vane slipping away into the shadows of the backstage area. He was too busy admiring his own reflection in the glass doors. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. I stood backstage with Ethan, watching the crowd on a monitor. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my hands were steady. "Are you ready?" Ethan asked, adjusting his tie. He looked handsome, but more importantly, he looked like a partner. "I was born ready," I replied. The lights dimmed. The host announced the first presenter, Julian Thorne of Thorne Corp. Julian walked onto the stage to polite applause. He launched into his presentation with practiced charisma. Behind him, the massive LED screen displayed my designs. The smart city grid, the sustainable parks, the very soul of my creativity, but with his logo stamped over them. "We don't just build buildings," Julian boomed into the microphone. "We build legacies. This design is the culmination of my life's work. It is unique, it is visionary, and it is safe." I watched from the wings, feeling a surge of nausea. He was so convincing. If I hadn't lived through his abuse, I might have believed him myself. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the private viewing box high above the stage. "Is it really your work, Mr. Thorne?" The room went deathly silent. A spotlight swung up to the VIP box. The glass partition lowered slowly to reveal an older man in a bespoke suit, holding a cane. It was Magnus Blackwood. Julian squinted into the light, confused. He didn't recognize the billionaire immediately. The distance and the suit threw him off. "Mr. Blackwood," Julian stammered, recovering his smile. "Of course, every line, every calculation. My team and I have bled for this." "Then you won't mind if I invite a second opinion," Magnus said, his voice amplified through the speakers. "Bring out the competition." Ethan nudged me. "Showtime." I took a deep breath and stepped out into the blinding stage lights, walking straight toward Julian. While the gasp from the audience was audible. Julian turned, and his confident smile shattered like dropped porcelain. "Serena?" "Hello, Julian," I said, my voice magnified, calm, and cold. "I believe you're presenting my portfolio." The silence in the auditorium was heavy, suffocating. Julian stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost. I wasn't the broken woman in the thrift store dress anymore. I was his equal, and I was holding the detonator. "This is preposterous," Julian yelled, trying to regain control of the room. He turned to the audience, forcing a laugh. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is my ex-wife. She's clearly distraught over our divorce and is trying to create a scene. Security!" Two guards started to move toward the stage, but Magnus Blackwood's voice stopped them cold. "Let her speak." I plugged my tablet into the podium's interface. On the massive screen behind us, split in two. On the left was Julian's presentation. On the right, a new image appeared, a complex digital ledger. "You claim this design is yours, Julian," I said, addressing him directly. But in the digital age, ownership isn't about who shouts the loudest, it's about the code. I tapped the screen. 2 years ago, I minted every single one of my architectural sketches as an NFT on a private blockchain. It's immutable proof of creation, time-stamped down to the second. The screen zoomed in. The date on my files was clearly visible, March 14th, 2021. And here, I pointed to Julian's files on the left, is the metadata from the files you presented today, created last week. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Julian's face turned a sickly shade of pale. This is hacking. She manipulated the data. Did I? I asked coolly. Or did you just forget that the maid you married was top of her class at MIT before she became your wife? Julian lunged toward me, desperation in his eyes. You ungrateful witch! I gave you everything. Ethan stepped in front of me, blocking Julian's path with his broader frame. Back off, Thorn. But that's not all, I continued, unperturbed. Julian, you also claimed these designs were safe, but you swapped out the structural integrity specs to save money on concrete. If you build this, that tower collapses in a magnitude 4.0 earthquake. I displayed the stolen internal emails, the ones Bella had given me. They showed Julian explicitly ordering the cost-cutting measures, overriding his engineer's warnings. You weren't just stealing my work, I said, all my voice ringing with finality. You were planning to build a tomb. Julian looked around wildly. The investors were on their phones, likely dumping Thorn Corp stock. The press cameras were zooming in on his sweating face. It's a lie, he screamed, his voice cracking. Bella, Bella, tell them! He looked toward the wings for his lawyer, his accomplice. But Bella didn't come out to save him. Julian's desperate cry for Bella echoed into nothingness. She was gone, having slipped out the back exit moments ago to save her own skin. He stood alone on the stage, stripped of his lies, trembling in his expensive suit. You have no proof, Julian snarled, though his voice lacked conviction. This is a corporate hit job. Who is backing you, Hunt? He's just a jealous competitor. From the VIP box above, the sound of slow, deliberate clapping began. Not clap, clap, clap. Magnus Blackwood stood up and leaned over the railing. The spotlight caught the glint of his Patek Philippe watch. Actually, Mr. Thorne, Magnus said, his voice booming like thunder, I am backing her. Chairman Blackwood, Julian pleaded, looking up. Please, you can't listen to them. I can explain. Save your breath, Magnus interrupted. I don't need an explanation. I need an apology for my boots. Julian blinked, confused. Your boots? 3 years ago, Magnus continued, I started working in your garden. I trimmed your hedges, I watered your roses, and last week you kicked a bucket of soapy water onto my boots because I accidentally splashed your Porsche. The color drained from Julian's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out, and he stared at the billionaire titan above him, and suddenly the image of the old, hunched gardener superimposed itself over the man in the suit. You, Julian whispered, horrified realization dawning on him. You're the gardener? Magnus? I am Magnus Blackwood, my father declared, and Serena is my daughter. A collective gasp swept through the auditorium. The reporters went into a frenzy, typing furiously. Billionaire goes undercover as gardener to test son-in-law. It was the story of the decade. I gave you every chance, Julian, Magnus said, his tone filled with disdain. I watched how you treated her. I watched how you treated me. You failed the test of character long before you failed the test of business. Magnus pressed a button on his remote. Thorncorp's line of credit was secured by Blackwood Global. As of this moment, I am calling in the debt immediately. Julian fell to his knees. No, please, that will bankrupt me. You did that to yourself, Magnus said coldly. Security, remove this trespasser from my stage. 2 burly guards marched onto the stage. They grabbed Julian by the arms, the same way he had grabbed me so many times, and began to drag him away. As he was hauled past me, Julian looked up. His eyes were wild, pleading. "Serena, please, I tell him. We were partners." I looked down at him, my expression unreadable. "Partners share profits, Julian. You wanted all the credit. Now you can take all the blame." The applause was deafening as Ethan and I walked off the stage. Julian had been dragged out the side door, screaming threats that no one listened to. But my work wasn't done yet. There was one loose end left, and I walked straight past the celebrating team and headed for the parking garage. I knew exactly where Bella would go. She was a survivor, and survivors run. Sure enough, near the VIP exit, I saw her. She was frantically trying to load her luggage into the trunk of her white Range Rover. She looked disheveled, her Prada coat slipping off her shoulder. "Going somewhere, Bella?" I asked, my voice echoing in the concrete structure. She spun around, dropping her keys. "Serena, I did what you asked. I gave you the files. We had a deal." "We had an arrangement," I corrected, stepping closer. "You gave me the weapon to kill Julian, but that doesn't wash the blood off your hands." "I was a victim too," she cried, tears streaming down her face, though I suspected they were for herself, not for any remorse. "He manipulated me, and he promised me partnership, money. He made me forge those documents." "He made you?" I laughed dryly. "Did he make you mock my clothes at the gala? Did he make you suggest throwing my suitcase into the rain?" "No, Bella, you enjoyed it. You liked feeling superior." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. Bella's eyes widened in panic. "You called the cops?" she shrieked. "But I testified against him." "And you just admitted to forgery and conspiracy to commit fraud," I said calmly. "The immunity deal I mentioned, I never signed it. I just said you might have a chance at redemption. But redemption starts with accountability." Two police cruisers screeched to a halt, blocking the exit ramp. Officers swarmed out, guns drawn. "Bella Vane!" an officer shouted. "Hands where we can see them!" Bella looked at me with pure hatred. You bitch! I helped you." "No," I said, turning my back on her as the officers moved in to cuff her. "You helped yourself. And now you're going to help the district attorney." I watched from the rearview mirror of Ethan's car as they shoved her into the back of the cruiser. She was screaming, kicking, looking every bit as undignified as I had felt that night in the rain. Ethan started the engine. "That was cold," he said, but his tone was admiring. "It was necessary," I replied, leaning back in the leather seat. "Now take me to get a burger. I'm starving." A week later, the dust had settled, but the debris of Julian's life was still scattered everywhere. I received a call from the corrections facility. Julian had requested a visitor. Magnus told me not to go. Ethan told me he wasn't worth the gas money, but I needed closure, and I needed to see him one last time, not as his victim, but as the architect of his downfall. I sat in the cold, sterile visiting room, separated from him by a thick sheet of plexiglass. When the guards brought him in, I barely recognized him. The Armani suit was replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His perfectly styled hair was greasy and matted. He looked 10 years older. He sat down, his handcuffs clinking against the metal table. "Serena," he rasped, "you came." "I did," I said, keeping my hands folded on the table. "You have 5 minutes." I can fix this," he started, a desperate glint in his eyes. "I have offshore accounts, hidden assets. Bella didn't know about all of them. I can pay you back. Just talk to your father. Tell him to drop the charges. We can start over. Somewhere new. Just you and me." I stared at him, eyed incredulous. Even here at rock bottom, his narcissism blinded him. He truly believed he could buy his way out of anything. "You still don't get it, do you?" I asked softly. "This was never about the money, Julian." "Everything is about money," he snapped, slamming his fist on the glass. Don't give me that moral high ground crap. You destroyed me because I didn't give you a cut. I destroyed you because you tried to erase me, I said, standing up. You took my art, my home, and my dignity. You thought I was weak because I was kind. That was your fatal error. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single, crisp $1 bill. I slid it through the slot in the glass. What is this? He asked, staring at the money. It's your settlement, I said. For the years of partnership you claimed we had, and it's exactly what you think I'm worth. Keep the change. Serena, don't walk away from me, he screamed, standing up as the guards grabbed him. I made you. You are nothing without me. I stopped at the door and looked back over my shoulder. Actually, Julian, I smiled. I'm the CEO of Blackwood Hunt Designs. And you? You're just inmate number 4820. I walked out into the sunlight, leaving his screams trapped behind the heavy steel door. 6 months passed. The seasons changed, and so did the landscape of San Francisco. While I was busy breaking ground on the new eco-park, Julian and Bella were reaping what they had sown. Julian's trial was swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming. He was convicted of grand larceny, fraud, and embezzlement. The judge, clearly unimpressed by his attempts to blame his legal counsel, sentenced him to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. His assets were seized and auctioned off to pay back creditors. I heard through the grapevine that his beloved Porsche 911, the one he had screamed at my father over, was bought by a teenage YouTuber who planned to paint it neon pink and use it for prank videos. The thought made me chuckle. Bella Vane didn't fare much better. She avoided jail time by turning state's evidence, but her career was incinerated. No law firm in the country would touch her. She was disbarred and publicly shamed. One rainy Tuesday, Ethan and I stopped at a roadside diner on our way to a site inspection. We sat in a booth, reviewing blueprints on my iPad. Excuse me, can I get a refill? Ethan asked, waving at a waitress whose back was turned. The waitress turned around holding a pot of coffee, and her uniform was stained and she looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. It was Bella. Our eyes met. She froze, the coffee pot trembling in her hand. She looked from me to Ethan, then down at my Cartier bracelet and the designer bag on the seat. The shame on her face was palpable. Serena, she whispered. Just coffee, please, I said politely, treating her like a stranger. She poured the coffee with shaking hands, spilling a little on the table. I'm sorry, she mumbled, wiping it up frantically with a dirty rag. It's fine, I said. Keep the change. I left a $20 bill on the table. It wasn't out of kindness. It was a reminder that the woman who once looked down on me from a penthouse was now serving me burnt coffee for minimum wage. As we walked out to Ethan's car, he squeezed my hand. You okay? I'm better than okay, I said, taking a deep breath of the fresh air. I'm free. The grand opening of the Blackwood Hunt Tower was the event of the year. It wasn't just a building, it was a manifesto. A vertical forest rising from the heart of the city, powered entirely by renewable energy. It was everything Julian had promised but couldn't deliver, and everything I had dreamed of but was told I couldn't achieve. I stood on the observation deck looking out at the glittering San Francisco skyline. The wind played with the hem of my silk gown. This time, I wasn't wearing a thrift store dress. I was wearing a custom Oscar de la Renta, paid for with my own earnings. It's quite a view, a deep voice said behind me. I turned to see Ethan holding 2 flutes of champagne. He looked dashing in his tuxedo, but his eyes were warm and familiar. It is, I agreed, taking a glass. Hard to believe that a year ago I was sleeping on a bench down there. You were never going to stay on that bench, Ethan said, stepping closer. You have too much fire in you. He placed his glass on the railing and reached into his pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs. He pulled out a small velvet box. Serena, he began, his voice serious. We've built a company together. We've fought wars together, but I don't want to just be your business partner anymore." He opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike any other. It wasn't a massive, gaudy diamond like the one Julian had given me. It was an intricate band of platinum and sapphire, structured like the architectural beams of our first joint project. "I designed this myself," he said, looking nervous, "with a little help from your 3D printer. Serena Cross, will you build a life with me?" Tears pricked my eyes. Happy tears this time. "You designed it?" "I figured if I'm marrying the best architect in the world, the ring better have good structural integrity," he joked. I laughed, throwing my arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, Ethan." As he slipped the ring onto my finger, fireworks erupted over the bay, illuminating the city in bursts of gold and crimson. Below us, the gala guests cheered. Magnus was watching from the doorway, holding a glass of scotch. He raised it in a silent toast, his eyes crinkling with pride. He had his daughter back, and for the first time in a long time the Empire was at peace. Peace is a strange sensation when you've been at war for so long. The morning after the gala, I drove out to my father's real estate in the Los Altos Hills. It was a sprawling sanctuary of redwoods and glass, far removed from the noise of the city. I found Magnus in the backyard. He wasn't wearing a suit, and he wasn't checking the stock market. He was wearing old denim jeans and kneeling in the dirt, pruning his prize-winning hydrangeas. I smiled, leaning against the archway. "You know, Dad, for a trillionaire, you spend a lot of time playing in the mud. You can hire people for that." Magnus stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at me, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "I could. But Julian never understood the lesson. You have to get your hands dirty to make something beautiful grow. He wanted the flower without the roots." I walked over and sat on the stone bench, looking out over the valley. From here, the Blackwood Hunt Tower was just a gleaming needle in the distance. It was my legacy, standing tall against the horizon. "I went to see him," I admitted quietly. "Julian." Magnus stopped working. And I felt nothing, I said, twisting the sapphire engagement ring on my finger. No anger, no fear, just pity. He spent his whole life trying to build a facade of wealth, but he ended up bankrupt in every way that matters. "He forgot that true value isn't in the brand name on your watch," Magnus said, nodding at my simple sketching clothes. "It's in your character." Ethan walked out onto the terrace holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to my father and sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. He didn't say anything, he just offered his presence, solid and reassuring. I opened my moleskin sketchbook. For the first time in months, I wasn't drawing blueprints or structural diagrams. I began to sketch the scene in front of me. My father in his garden, the man I loved beside me, and the sun rising over a world that was finally wide open. I had lost a husband who saw me as a servant, but I had found a partner who saw me as a queen. I had lost a house, but I had built a home. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of pine and damp earth. The nightmare was over. The maid was gone. I looked at the blank page, picked up my charcoal, and began to draw. I was Serena Blackwood Cross. I was an architect, and for the first time in my life, I was free. So the story has finally come to a close. To our wonderful friends, are you still here with us at this hour? If you are, then something in Serena's journey must have truly touched your heart. This wasn't just a drama about revenge or hidden billions. It was a profound reminder about the nature of worth. Julian built his life on the fragile sands of ego and status, believing that the brand on his suit defined his value. He forgot the timeless wisdom of the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, who said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Serena didn't win by becoming a monster like Julian. She won by retaining her integrity when she had nothing, and by extending grace when she had everything. She proved that rock bottom isn't the end. It's the solid foundation upon which you build your greatest comeback. If this story gave you hope or inspired you to build your own empire of kindness, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Don't forget to subscribe so we can continue telling stories that heal the soul. Until next time,